You know what time it is? Woo! Get into it! Get into it! Yes! I am back. Hi, it's Storytime with Chris. We're back again with E.B. White's Charlotte's Web. And no, I don't own the music that you're listening to in the background, which is brought to you yet again by my wonderful friend of the internets, Mr. Ambiance. So please go give them some love. Like, share, subscribe onto their channel. They have beautiful ambient music from different movies, television shows, anime, animated films. They got it all, and the music is fire and perfect type of ambient music that I need so that I don't get copywritten, as well as bringing the ambiance with which I want for my reading. As I always say, you don't have to watch these videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your downtime, nap time, max, relax, and chillaxing time, in between time, meantime, scheming time, study time, break time, CP time, any time that you want to hear a highly animated voice bring you wonderful stories of magic, fantasy, science fiction, adventure, and many, many more in between. So we're back because it looks like Wilbur is going to be going to the county fair because Charlotte has put up she did some pig, and then she put up terrific, and then she put up another word, radiant. And so now everybody is very perplexed of the strangeness of the situation. Like, this is a really strange pig. But then most people with good sense would realize, no, this is a very intelligent spider. Like, oh, then nothing's remarkable about the spider. Then how did the web get there? But we'll get to that conversation another time. But let's go ahead and get started, okay? Oh, let me make sure. Okay, yep. Let me make sure I'm not going to be disturbed in any way. Okay. All right. Sorry, I was looking for my place. There we go. Chapter 15. The Crickets. The crickets sang in the grasses. They sang the song of summer's ending. A sad, monotonous song. Summer is over and gone, they sang. Over and gone, over and gone. Summer is dying, dying. The crickets felt it was their duty to warn everybody that summertime cannot last forever. Even on the most beautiful days in the whole year, the days when summer is changing into fall, the crickets spread the rumor of sadness and change. And as an October baby, that is a welcome phrase of relief, because summer is too much. It's way too hot. I'm not a lover of summer. If I was on vacation, sure. Near water, absolutely. But yeah, fall all day. Fall and spring, those two. Winter is a close third. I don't mind winter at all. I love snow and ice. Genuinely speaking, I do. And people saying that I'm foolish and crazy for having that feeling. But hey, that's just me. Everybody heard the song of the crickets. Avery and Fern Arable heard it as they walked the dusty road. They knew that school would soon begin again. The young geese heard it and knew that they would never be little goslings again. Charlotte heard it and knew that she hadn't much time left. Mrs. Zuckerman at work in the kitchen heard the crickets, and a sadness came over her too. "Another summer gone," she sighed. Lurvy at work building a crate for Wilbur heard the song and knew it was time to dig potatoes. "Summer is over and gone," repeated the crickets. "How many nights till frost?" sang the crickets. "Goodbye, summer, goodbye, goodbye." The sheep heard the crickets, and they felt so uneasy they broke a hole in the pasture fence and wandered up into the field across the road. The gander discovered the hole and led his family through, and they walked to the orchard and ate the apples that were lying on the ground. A little maple tree in the swamp heard the cricket song and turned bright red with anxiety. Wilbur was now the center of attraction on the farm. Good food and regular hours were showing results. Wilbur was a pig any man would be proud of. One day, more than 100 people came to stand at his yard and admire him. Charlotte had written the word radiant, and Wilbur really looked radiant as he stood in the golden sunlight. Ever since the spider befriended him, he had done his best to live up to his reputation. When Charlotte's Web said some pig, Wilbur tried hard to look like Some pig. When Charlotte's web said terrific, Wilbur tried to look terrific, and now that the word said radiant, he did everything possible to make himself glow. It is not easy to look radiant, but Wilbur threw himself into it with a will. He would turn his head slightly and blink his long eyelashes. Then he would breathe deeply, and when his audience grew bored, he would spring into the air and do a backflip with a half twist. At this, the crowd would yell and cheer. "How's that for a pig?" Mr. Zuckerman would ask, well pleased with himself. "That pig is radiant." Some of Wilbur's friends in the barn worried for fear all this attention would go to his head and make him stuck up. But it never did. Wilbur was modest. Fame did not spoil him. He still worried about the future, as he could hardly believe that a mere spider would be able to save his life. Sometimes at night he would have a bad dream. He would dream that men were coming to get him with knives and guns, but that was only a dream. In the daytime, Wilbur usually felt happy and confident. No pig ever had truer friends, and he realized that friendship is one of the most satisfying things in the world. I will repeat that line. No pig had truer friends. And he realized that friendship is one of the most satisfying things in the world. And let this be a lesson to you kids. I don't care how famous you get or how well known you get. You should not do what you do for other people or to help other people for notoriety and recognition. You should do for others without seeking compensation and without seeking grandeur attention. Humble yourself. To be humble and to be modest is to know that you are skilled, to know that you are great, to know that you are worthwhile, but not needing to blast it out for the world to hear. You don't need that as a modest or a humble person. You know that you're good enough. You know what you bring to the table. You know what you do for other people. So you don't need other people to boast your accomplishments to boost your ego, and you don't boast your accomplishments to boost your ego. That's what I think everybody should strive towards. There's a lot of amazing artists that are award-winning artists, such as Halle Berry. She's an Academy Award winner. The second black woman to ever win an Academy Award back in the mid-90s. Viola Davis is an Academy Award winner, Emmy Award winner, Golden Globe, Oscar winner, and she has a Tony Award, and then she could be an EGOT. Whoopi Goldberg is an amazing person. Lizzo, Beyonce, they're award winners, and they do their best to humble themselves in their public eye. Lady Gaga is a Grammy Award and Oscar winner, and if I'm not mistaken, Emmy and Golden Globe. I think it was just the Golden Globes. But these are many examples of people who... Chris Stapleton is a very humble person. He's a country singer who does amazing music, but doesn't have to boast the fact that he's an amazing country singer. He knows this and recognizes his gift and uses it for his enjoyment and the enjoyment of others. So you can still be successful, but learn how to be humble. Because when you're humble, you gain more success. Because when you become arrogant and overconfident and swagger out as though you are God's gift to the earth, you tend to lose a lot more than you bargained for. Trust me. Even the song of the crickets did not make Wilbur too sad. He knew it was almost time for the county fair, and he was looking forward to the trip. If he could distinguish himself at the fair and maybe would win some prize money, he was sure Zuckerman would let him live. Charlotte had worries of her own, but she kept quiet about them. One morning, Wilbur asked her about the fair. "You are going with me, aren't you, Charlotte?" he said.
"Well, I don't know," replied Charlotte. "The fair comes at a bad time for me. I shall find it inconvenient to leave home, even for a few days."
"Why?" asked Wilbur.
"Oh, I just don't feel like leaving my web. Too much going on around here."
"Please come with me," begged Wilbur. "I need you, Charlotte. I can't stand going to the fair without you. You've just got to come."
"No," said Charlotte. "I believe I'd better stay home and see if I can't get some work done."
"What kind of work?" asked Wilbur.
"Egg-laying. It's time I made an egg sack and filled it with eggs."
"I didn't know you could lay eggs," said Wilbur in amazement.
"Oh, sure," said the spider. "I'm versatile."
"What does versatile mean?" Full of eggs? Asked Wilbur.
Certainly not, said Charlotte. Versatile means I can turn with ease from one thing to another. It means I don't have to limit my activities to spinning and trapping and stunts like that.
Why don't you come with me to the fairgrounds and lay your eggs there? Pleaded Wilbur. It would be a wonderful fun. Charlotte gave her web a twitch and moodily watched it sway.
I'm afraid not, she said. You don't know the first thing about egg-laying, Wilbur. I can't arrange my family duties to suit the management of the county fair. When I get ready to lay eggs, I have to lay eggs, fair or no fair. However, I don't want you to worry about it. You might lose weight. We'll leave it this way. I'll come to the fair if I possibly can.
Oh, good, said Wilbur. I knew you wouldn't forsake me when I need you most. All that day, Wilbur stayed inside, taking life easy in the straw. Charlotte rested and ate a grasshopper. She knew that she couldn't help Wilbur much longer. In a few days, she would have to drop everything and build the beautiful little egg sack that would hold her eggs. Chapter 16. Off to the fair. The night before the county fair, everybody went to bed early. Fern and Avery were in bed by 8. Avery lay dreaming that the Ferris wheel had stopped and that he was in the top car. Fern lay dreaming that she was getting sick in the swings. Lurvy was in bed by 8:30. He lay dreaming that he was throwing baseballs at a cloth cat and winning a genuine Navajo blanket. Mr. and Mrs. Zuckerman were in bed by 9. Mrs. Zuckerman lay dreaming about a deep freeze unit. Mr. Zuckerman lay dreaming about Wilbur. He dreamt that Wilbur had grown until he was 160 feet long and 92 feet high, and that he had won all the prizes at the fair, was covered with blue ribbons, and even had a blue ribbon tied to the end of his tail. Down in the barn cellar, the animals too went to bed early, all except Charlotte. Tomorrow would be fair day. Every creature planned to get up early to see Wilbur off on his great adventure. That's what Mr. Zuckerman was dreaming about. When morning came, everybody got up at daylight. The day was hot. Up the road at the Arable's house, Fern lugged a pail of hot water to her room and took a sponge bath. She put on her prettiest dress because she knew she would see boys at the fair. Mrs. Arable scrubbed the back of Avery's neck and wet his hair and parted it and brushed it down hard till it stuck to the top of his head. All about but 6 hairs that stood straight up. Avery put on clean underwear, clean blue jeans, and a clean shirt. Mr. Arable dressed, ate breakfast, and went out and polished his truck. He'd offered to drive everybody to the fair, including Wilbur. Bright and early, Lurvy put clean straw in Wilbur's crate and lifted it into the pig pen. The crate was green. In gold letters it said, Zuckerman's Famous Pig. Charlotte had her web looking fine for the occasion. Wilbur ate his breakfast slowly. He tried to look radiant without getting food in his ears. In the kitchen, Mrs. Zuckerman suddenly made an announcement. "Homer," she said to her husband, "I'm going to give that pig a buttermilk bath." "A what?" said Mr. Zuckerman. "A buttermilk bath. My grandmother used to bathe her pig with buttermilk when it got dirty. I just remembered it." "Wilbur's not dirty," said Mr. Zuckerman proudly. "He's filthy behind the ears," said Mrs. Zuckerman. "Every time Lurvy slops him, the food runs down around the ears. Then it dries and forms a crust. He also has a smudge on one side where he lays in the manure." "He lays in clean straw," corrected Mr. Zuckerman. "Well, he's dirty, and he's going to have a bath." Mr. Zuckerman sat down weakly and ate a donut. His wife went to the woodshed. When she returned, she wore rubber boots and an old raincoat, and she carried a bucket of buttermilk and a small wooden pail. "Edith, you're crazy," mumbled Zuckerman, but she paid no attention to him. Together they walked to the pig pen. Mrs. Zuckerman wasted no time. She climbed in with Wilbur and went to work. Dipping her paddle in the buttermilk, she rubbed him all over. The geese gathered around to see the fun, and so did the sheep and lambs. Even Templeton poked his head out cautiously to watch Wilbur get a buttermilk bath. Charlotte got so interested she lowered herself on a drag line so she could see better. Also, shout out to my friends that are farmers and agricultural workers. Is that actually a thing? Like, to clean a pig or to make it look clean, you use buttermilk and give it a buttermilk bath? Please comment below or message me, because I'm just curious about that. Wilbur stood still and closed his eyes. He could feel the buttermilk trickling down his sides. He opened his mouth and some buttermilk ran in. It was delicious. It felt radiant. And happy. When Mrs. Zuckerman got through and rubbed him dry, he was the cleanest, prettiest pig you ever saw. He was pure white, pink around the ears and snout, and smooth as silk. The Zuckermans went up to change into their best clothes. Lurvy went to shave and put on his plaid shirt and his purple necktie. The animals were left to themselves in the barn. The 7 goslings paraded round and round their mother. "Please, please, please take us to the fair," begged a gosling. Then all 7 began teasing to go. "Please, please, 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 please." They made quite a racket. "Children," snapped the goose, "we're staying quietly, idly at home. Only Wilbur is going to the fair." Just then Charlotte interrupted.
"I shall go, too," she said softly. "I have decided to go with Wilbur. He may need me. We can't tell what may happen at the fairgrounds. Someone's got to go along who knows how to write. And I think Templeton better come, too. I might need somebody to run errands and do general work."
"I'm staying right here," grumbled the rat. "I haven't the slightest interest in fairs."
"That's because you've never been to one," remarked the old sheep. "A fair is a rat's paradise. Everybody spills food at a fair. A rat can creep out late at night and have a feast. In the horse barn you will find oats that the trotters and pacers have spilled. In the trampled grass of the infield you will find only discarded lunch boxes containing the foul remains of peanut butter sandwiches, hard-boiled eggs, cracker crumbs, bits of donuts, and particles of cheese. In the hard-packed dirt of the midway after the glaring lights are out and the people have gone home to bed, you will find a veritable treasure of popcorn fragments, frozen custard dribblings, candied apples abandoned by tired children, sugar fluff crystals, salted almonds, popsicles, partially gnawed ice cream cones, and the wooden sticks of lollipops. Everywhere is loot for a rat. In tents, in booths, in haylofts. Why, a fair is enough disgusting leftover food to satisfy a whole army of rats." Templeton's eyes were blazing.
"Is this true?" he asked. "Is this appetizing yarn of yours true? I like high living, and what you say tempts me."
"It is true," said the old sheep. "Go to the fair, Templeton. You will find that the conditions at a fair will surpass your wildest dreams. Buckets with sour mash sticking to them, tin cans containing particles of tuna fish, greasy paper bags stuffed with rotten—"
"That's enough!" cried Templeton. "Don't tell me any more. I'm going."
"Good,"
said Charlotte, winking at the old sheep.
"Now then, there's no time to be lost. Wilbur will soon be put into the crate. Templeton and I must get in the crate right now and hide ourselves."
The rat didn't waste a minute. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. Somebody must be talking about me because I do not yawn that often. Gracious, I'm so sorry. The rat didn't waste any time. He scampered over to the crate, crawled between the slats, and pulled straw up over him so he was hidden from sight.
"All right," said Charlotte. "I'm next."
She sailed into the air, let out a drag line, and dropped gently to the ground. She climbed the side of the crate and hid herself inside a knothole in the top board. The old sheep nodded. "What a cargo," she said. "The sign ought to say Zuckerman's famous pig and 2 stowaways." "Look out, the people are coming, yumming," shouted the gander. "Cheese it, cheese it, cheese it." Which cheese it is an old slang term to like scatter, like run, like look like you're busy. The big truck with Mr. Arable and the wheel backed slowly down toward the barnyard. Lurvy and Mr. Zuckerman walked alongside. Fern and Avery were standing in the body of the truck, hanging on to the sideboards. "Listen to me," whispered the old sheep to Wilbur. "When they open the crate and try to put you in, struggle. Don't go without a tussle. Pigs always resist when they are being boarded." "If I struggle, I'll get dirty," said Wilbur. "Never mind that. Do as I say. Struggle. If you were to walk into the crate without resisting, Zuckerman might think you were bewitched. He'd be scared to go to the fair." Templeton poked his head up through the straw.
"Struggle if you must," he said, "but kindly remember that I'm hiding down here in this crate and I don't want to be stepped on or kicked in the face or pummeled or crushed in any way or squashed or buffeted about or bruised or lacerated or scarred or biffed. Just watch what you're doing, Mr. Radiant, when they get you shoving you in."
"Be quiet, Templeton," said the sheep. "Pull in your head. They're coming. Look radiant, Wilbur. Lay low, Charlotte. Talk it up, geese." The truck backed slowly to the pig pen and stopped. Mr. Arable cut the motor, got out, walked around to the rear, and lowered the tailgate. The geese cheered. Mrs. Arable got out of the truck. Fern and Avery jumped to the ground. Mrs. Zuckerman came walking down from the house. Everybody lined up at the fence and stood for a moment admiring Wilbur and the beautiful green crate. Nobody realized that the crate already contained a rat and a spider. "That's some pig," said Mrs. Arable. "He's terrific," said Lurvy. "He's very radiant," said Fern, remembering the day he was born. "Well," said Mrs. Zuckerman, "he's clean anyway. The buttermilk certainly helped." Mr. Arable studied Wilbur carefully. "Yes, he's a wonderful pig," he said. "It's hard to believe that he was the run of the litter. You'll get some extra good ham and bacon, Homer, when it comes time to kill that pig." Wilbur heard these words, and his heart almost stopped. "I think I'm going to faint," he whispered to the old sheep who was watching. "Kneel down," whispered the old sheep. "Let the blood rush to your head." Wilbur sank to his knees, all radiance gone, his eyes closed. "Look!" screamed Fern. "He's fading away!" "Hey, watch me!" yelled Avery, crawling on all fours into the crate. "I'm a pig! I'm a pig!" Avery's foot touched Templeton under the straw.
What a mess, thought the rat. What fantastic creatures boys are. Why did I let myself in for this?
The geese saw Avery in the crate and cheered. "Avery, you get out of that crate this instant," commanded his mother. "What do you think you are?" "I'm a pig," cried Avery, tossing handfuls of straw into the air.
Oink, oink, oink.
The truck is rolling away, Papa," said Fern. The truck, with no one at the wheel, had started to roll downhill. Mr. Arable dashed to the driver's seat and pulled on the emergency brake. The truck stopped. The geese cheered. Charlotte crouched and made herself as small as possible in the knothole so Avery wouldn't see her. "Come out at once!" cried Mrs. Arable. Avery crawled out of the crate on hands and knees, making faces at Wilbur. Wilbur fainted away. "The pig is passed out," said Mrs. Zuckerman. "Throw water on him." "Throw buttermilk," suggested Avery. The geese cheered. Lurvy ran for a pail of water. Fern climbed into the pen and knelt by Wilbur's side. "It's sunstroke," said Zuckerman. "The heat is too much for him." "Maybe he's dead," said Avery. "Come out of that pig pen immediately," cried Mrs. Arable. Avery obeyed his mother and climbed into the back of the truck so he could see better. Lurvy returned with cold water and dashed it on Wilbur. "Throw some on me," cried Avery. "I'm hot too." "Oh, keep quiet," hollered Fern. "Keep quiet." Her eyes were brimming with tears. Wilbur, feeling the cold water, came to. He rose slowly to his feet while the geese cheered. "He's up," said Mr. Arable. "I guess there's nothing wrong with him." Not until you said what you said, sir, because that's not helpful. Don't be putting that idea into his head of toasty bacon and ham. "I'm hungry," said Avery. "I want a candied apple."
"Wilbur's all right now," said Fern. "We can start. I want to take a ride in the Ferris wheel."
Mr. Zuckerman and Mr. Arable and Lurvy grabbed the pig and pushed him headfirst toward the crate. Wilbur began to struggle. The harder the men pushed, the harder he held back. Avery jumped out and joined the men. Wilbur kicked and thrashed and grunted. "Nothing wrong with this pig," said Mr. Zuckerman, cheerfully pressing his knee against Wilbur's behind. "All together now, boys! Shove!" With a final heave, they jammed him into the crate. The geese cheered. Lurvy nailed some boards across the end so Wilbur couldn't back out. Then, using all their strength, the men picked up the crate and heaved it aboard the truck. They did not know that under the straw was a rat and inside a knothole was a big gray spider. They saw only a pig. "Everybody in," called Mr. Arable. He started the motor. The ladies climbed in beside him. Mr. Zuckerman and Lurvy and Fern and Avery rode in back, hanging onto the sideboards. The truck began to move ahead. The geese cheered. The children answered their cheer, and away went everybody to the fair. Chapter 17. Uncle. When they pulled into the fairgrounds, they could hear music and see the Ferris wheel turning in the sky. They could smell the dust of the racetrack where the sprinkling cart had moistened it, and they could smell hamburgers frying and see balloons aloft. They could hear sheep blatting in the pens. An enormous voice over the loudspeaker said, "Attention, please. Will the owner of a Pontiac car, license number H2439, please move your car away from the fireworks shed?"
Can I have some money? Said Fern.
Can I have some money? Asked Avery.
I'm gonna win a doll by spinning a wheel and it will stop at the right number, said Fern.
I'm gonna steer a jet plane and make it bump into another one.
Can I have a balloon?
Asked Fern. Can I have a frozen custard and a cheeseburger and some raspberry soda pop? Asked Avery. You children be quiet till we get the pig unloaded, said Mrs. Arable. Let's let the children go by themselves, suggested Mr. Arable. The fair only comes once a year. Mr. Arable gave Fern 2 quarters and 2 dimes. He gave Avery 5 dimes and 4 nickels. Now run along, he said, and remember, the money has to last all day. Don't spend it all in the first few minutes. And be back at the truck at noontime so we can all have lunch together. And don't eat a lot of stuff that's going to make you sick to your stomachs. And if you go in those swings, said Mrs. Arable, you hang on tight. You hang on very tight. Hear me? And don't get lost, said Mrs. Arable. And don't get dirty. Don't get overheated, said their mother. Watch out for pickpockets, cautioned their father. And don't cross the racetrack when the horses are coming, cried Mrs. Zuckerman. Sounds like me when in Cleveland growing up, when we would go to like the Bedford, either it was Bedford or Bedford Heights would have a fair. I know Garfield Heights would have a fair. And then I'm trying to think. There's the Puerto Rican Festival in downtown Cleveland. I just remember like going with my older cousins and my mom or my aunts would be like, all right, don't spend all this money. Save it. Like, go have fun, but use it wisely because once it's gone, it's gone. Hopefully some kids in this generation get that experience. If you've ever been to a county fair or a town fair, let me know and comment below. The children grabbed each other by the hand and danced off in the direction of the merry-go-round, toward the wonderful music and the wonderful adventure and the wonderful excitement, into the wonderful midway where there would be no parents to guard them and guide them, where they could be happy and free and do as they pleased. Mrs. Arable stood quietly and watched them go. Then she sighed. She blew her nose. Do you really think it's all right? She asked. Well, they've got to grow up sometime, said Mr. Arable, and a fair is a good place to start, I guess. Which is very true. You got to be very vigilant, y'all. No matter where you're at, whether it's Kings Island, Cedar Point, Disney World, Universal Studios, Disneyland, whatever amusement park or fairgrounds, be vigilant. Be aware of your surroundings, okay? Some unsavory people sometimes. You got to be very aware. And there it is. While Wilbur was being unloaded and taken out of his crate into his new pig pen, crowds gathered to watch. They stared at the signs, Zuckerman's famous pig. Wilbur stared back and tried to look extra good. He was pleased with his new home. The pen was grassy and it was shaded from the sun by a shed roof. Charlotte, watching her chance, scrambled out of the crate and climbed a post to the underside of the roof. Nobody noticed her. Templeton, not wishing to come out in broad daylight, stayed quietly under the straw at the bottom of the crate. Mr. Zuckerman poured some skim milk into Wilbur's trough, pitched clean straw into his pen, and then he and Mrs. Zuckerman and the Arables walked away toward the cattle barn to look at purebred cows and to see the sights. Mr. Zuckerman particularly wanted to look at tractors. Mrs. Zuckerman wanted to see a deep freeze. Lurvy wandered off by himself, hoping to meet friends and have some fun on the midway. Which, by the way, kids, a deep freezer is basically just a mini fridge specifically for frozen items. Back in the day, you had a refrigerator, but you didn't have a freezer combined with that. That was later in life where they combined those two aspects. And you got to keep in mind, this story is set in the late 1930s, and it's in the Midwest. So having a deep freezer and a refrigerator were two separate things. So, yeah, fun fact. Get a lot of cool stuff at the fair. Even now, you can still buy appliances and kitchenware at the fair. And good meat and cheeses and so on. As soon as the people were gone, Charlotte spoke to Wilbur.
It's a good thing you can't see what I see, she said.
What do you see? Asked Wilbur.
There's a pig in the next pen, and he's enormous. I'm afraid he's much bigger than you are.
Maybe he's older than I am and has had more time to grow, suggested Wilbur. Tears began to come to his eyes.
I'll drop down and have a closer look, Charlotte said.
Then she crawled along a beam till she was directly over the next pen. She let herself down on a drag line until she hung in the air just in front of his big pig snout.
May I have your name? She asked politely.
The pig stared at her.
No name,
He said in a big, hearty voice.
just call me Uncle.
Very well, Uncle, replied Charlotte. What is the date of your birth? Are you a spring pig?
Sure I'm a spring pig, replied Uncle. What did you think I was, a spring chicken? That's a good one, ain't it, sister?
Mildly funny, said Charlotte. I've heard funnier ones, though. Glad to have met you. And now I must be going.
She ascended slowly and returned to Wilbur's pen.
He claims he's a spring pig, reported Charlotte. Perhaps he is. One thing is certain, he has a most unattractive personality. He's too familiar, too nosy, and he cracks weak jokes. Also, he's not anywhere near as clean as you are, nor as pleasant. I took quite a dislike to him in our brief interview. He's going to be a hard pig to beat, though. Wilbur, on account of his size and weight, but with me helping you, it can be done.
When are you going to spin a web? Asked Wilbur.
This afternoon, late, if I'm not too tired, said Charlotte. The least thing tires me these days. I don't seem to have the energy I once had. My age, I guess.
Wilbur looked at his friend. She looked rather swollen, and she seemed listless. I'm awfully sorry to hear that you're feeling poorly, Charlotte, he said. Perhaps if you spin a web and catch a couple of flies, you'll feel better.
Perhaps, she said wearily, but I feel like the end of a long day.
Clinging upside down to the ceiling, she settled down for a nap, leaving Wilbur very much worried. All morning, people wandered past Wilbur's pen. Dozens and dozens of strangers stopped to stare at him and to admire his silky white coat, his curly tail, his kind and radiant expression. Then they would move on to the next pen where the bigger pig lay. Wilbur heard several people make favorable remarks about Uncle's great size. He couldn't help overhearing these remarks, and he couldn't help worrying. And now with Charlotte not feeling well, he thought, oh dear. All morning, Templeton slept quietly under the straw. The day grew fiercely hot. At noon, the Zuckermans and the Arables returned to the pig pen. Then a few minutes later, Fern and Avery showed up. Fern had a monkey doll in her arms and was eating Cracker Jack, which is one of my favorite childhood snacks. I love Cracker Jack. Avery had a balloon tied to his ear and was chewing a candied apple. The children were hot and dirty. "Isn't it hot?" said Mrs. Arable. "Excuse me, Mrs. Zuckerman." "It's terribly hot," said Mrs. Arable, fanning herself with an advertisement of a deep freeze. One by one, they climbed into the truck and opened lunch boxes. The sun beat down on everything. Nobody seemed hungry. "When are the judges going to decide about Wilbur?" asked Mrs. Zuckerman. "Not till tomorrow," said Mr. Zuckerman. Lurvy appeared carrying a blanket that he had won. "That's just what we need," said Avery, "a blanket." "Of course it is," replied Lurvy, and he spread the blanket across the sideboards of the truck so that it was like a little tent. The children sat in the shade under the blanket and felt better. After lunch, they stretched out and fell asleep. And that is where we will end for today. I thank you all so very much for joining me for Storytime with Chris. As I always say, if you ever have any suggestions, if you have any books that you would like me to read, or any specific authors you would like for me to look into, please message me, and I will try to do my best to accommodate. I love you all, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.